today. I always like to start class with certain exercises because I think getting yourself grounded and into the mindset of what we're about to do is really important. Getting into that rhythm in class is really important, but once you actually book a job, it's really kind of up to you to know exactly what your physiology is all about and what you require. But the more that you do it in this weekly practice, the more that you become familiar. I talk a lot about physiology because I think it's really important to acknowledge the trifecta that I think that makes it up, which is your mindset, your emotional connection, and your physicality, just being connected to your body and connected to all those three things so that they can sort of gel together. The 30 years I've been doing this, I just see example after example, as well as experience it myself. When one of those three things is off, you're just off your game. I think this can be a very athletic kind of a craft, where if you're ready to go and you're mentally there and you're emotionally there, but you're physically exhausted, it's just not going to work. Or any one of those three things are off, where you're physically healthy, your mind is sharp, but you just can't access your emotions. Or if your brain is glitching, which happens, and it just causes this frustration and this disconnect. So just syncing those three things up is something that is the reason why I always start class with some sort of activity that just sort of brings you into that world. And I see example after example. There hasn't been a single student that I've taught in the last decade who at some point didn't show up to class and just started crying. And then they're like, sorry, I need 20 minutes. And that's what class is for. That's the safe space that we provide. But when you're working professionally, you got to be on your game. Your timeline is not up to you. You just got to be ready. As well as from, anything can happen throughout the day. And by the end of the day, if something's not going right and you're out of sync, it could throw you off, it could throw the other people off, it could throw the production off. And you just want to always wrap each day feeling like, hey, I left it all out there. I gave it my all. And from 8 in the morning to 8 at night, I was on my game. That's what we always strive for. It may sound wanky, but this very much is a craft. And I've always had a deep respect for the craft, and the longer I've done it, the more I not only see examples of people that are just crushing it or falling into traps, as well as myself being put up to the challenge over and over again and trying to get a lesson out of it. But syncing those three, paring it down to something as simple as just my mind, my emotions, my body. Am I connected? Are they in sync? And the more we do this, the more we challenge ourselves, the more we start to recognize, one of those is off. What can I do to tend to myself and care for myself or get myself up to speed? And the simple examples I use is I'll either just sit quietly and meditate for 5 minutes, or I'll put on some Metallica and rock out and headbang in my car, whatever it may be, and get myself primed. And that's why I like to do things where you guys are used to getting up in the spotlight, in the hot seat, sharing yourself, being part of a group that you're comfortable and connected to those things. When you're actually acting, it's a very subversive thing. Nobody knows what's actually going on in your head. Nobody knows what you're actually accessing or using. That's a private thing. Nobody needs to know that. Your job is to serve the character, serve the story. And whatever you're emotionally connecting to with the familiarity in your life to step into the shoes of the character, that's entirely up to you. Nobody needs to know. But that's what I think is so intoxicating about this experience and this art form, which is you really do get to lend yourself into these roles, into these experiences, and experience what the character's going through in your own personal way. And that's the power of a mind. That's the power of imagination, is that when you're actually committing to going through the character's experience to serve the story and bring truth into the role, you're living it. This is living. It may be somebody else's script, but when you commit to it and commit to that process, whatever it is that you're bringing to the forefront of your mind is as powerful as the real experience. And you get to refine that and shape that with a director and a cast and tell a story that's deeply personal to you, but nobody ever needs to know what that is. But to me, class is that safe place where you get familiar with being able to access that and be in a group where you can share things like that in a safe place where if you want, you can share as much or as little as you want. So that said, I want to do an exercise today that's very much about injecting high stakes into any scene, because film and TV are life with the boring parts cut out. There's always extreme things happening. Things always need to matter. And personalizing that, I think, is a good starting point. And when we talk about the as if, in most books they call it substitution. I much prefer Sanford Meisner's term, the as if, because it's much more imagination based. It can be something that's palpable to you right this moment, or something that's very familiar to you, like when you were a teenager. What mattered to you then, it may not matter to you now, but you know that feeling of like, oh my God, I wanted that so bad, or oh my God, if that happened, it would have been disaster. And we're older and wiser for it now, but I can just think about being 17, 16 years old again, and it would make my heart start to pitter-patter. That's a good starting point. That's something that's familiar to me that I can access. And it doesn't have to line up to the stakes of what's happening in the script, but if it's a connected, familiar feeling that can serve the jumping point, the starting point, that's all you really need. If it's the core emotion, then it's the core emotion. And it doesn't matter if you're in your 40s versus being a teenager. If that injects fear or love or anger or disgust, that's the core emotion. So I want to do a quick little exercise here where I want you to talk about what matters to you most right now, but we'll start with what mattered to you most when you were a teenager.
Oh my God.
And when you can connect to something with high stakes, every scene, every character, there's something at stake of what do I stand to gain, what can I not afford to lose. That's a constant in scene work of what am I fighting for? And if I don't get what I want, what does that mean? It usually can spell disaster. And that's something that's a repetitive theme in any character, in any scene of, I have to fight. I have to win. I have to succeed. And if I lose, I will be devastated. So I'll give an example. All right, so when I was a teenager, nothing mattered to me more than getting into the top art school in New York City. I was pretty much, it was sort of almost determined for me that that's what I would be doing, because my whole life, it's like that's all I ever seemed to be really good at, was visual arts. And I loved comic books, and I loved animation, and I loved production design with I had this book called The Art of Star Wars, and I got to see that Stormtroopers and Darth Vader started with a drawing, and that blew my mind. So I was constantly drawing those things, and loving Marvel comics and DC comics, constantly drawing comic books to just loving the renaissance of Disney with Lion King and Little Mermaid, and seeing this possible future in movies that way. Little did I realize that I actually didn't want to go to art school at all. But to me, I was so dead set on getting into the top 3 New York City art schools. And I got into the third way too early my senior year, which caused a horrible case of senioritis. And then I got into the second, and I was feeling really good, except they didn't give me a single dime for financial aid or scholarships. And the number 1 school was actually called the Cooper Union, and it's a tuition-free university. So if you get in, they only took 60 people. If you get in, it's tuition-free. You just have to pay for room and board. And I got into this entrance program. It was like a stepping stone to get into the school. And that was huge. I actually left high school for 2 weeks to go do this program. And half of the week was over Christmas break, so I only really missed 1 week. But I was pretty sure I was going to get in. And when I didn't, I was curled up on the fetal position crying. And I was 17 years old, and I'd never gone through something like that before. I'd gone through girlfriend breakups and losing the big football game, or all that stuff, and I had emotions. But to me, it was my whole sense of identity was gone. I didn't know what to do, and I was so lost. I was absolutely rocked. So then I went to a liberal arts college, which I had no intention of doing, and that's when I was just I'm going to act. And that was a big pivotal point. So that was sort of a lesson in there, that it put me on a whole new trajectory. And I also realized I didn't want to be a visual artist. I really didn't. It was lonely. Just drawing all day long by yourself. And I know a really prominent comic book artist, and I've asked him about that. I was like, do you get lonely? He's like, oh, it's the worst. He's just alone all day long with his pencil. So all these years later, I'm sort of grateful for that experience. But at the time, oh my God, it was devastating. And then I took too much time on that, but now, all these years later, nothing matters to me more than my kids. I know that's an easy answer, but it's the truth. Nothing gets me more in love, nothing gets me more in fear, nothing incites more panic, and nothing brings me more calm. So it's just simply, I know that's an easy answer, but it's the truth. So to me, like, I could never do this before becoming a father, but I shared that bit where I had to cry in a booth for 2 hours. I mean, I can cry so easily now. That never happened before becoming a parent, you know what I mean? So that's just an easy answer, but it's true. It's just, I'm emotional. Never happened before then. So that's me. I want you to get up here, elaborate as much as you want on each one, but we'll take turns. And I just want you to, you don't have to talk as long as me either, but, I'm still recording. You don't.
And mistakes are just a way to learn.
Yeah.
Okay?
We've made plenty.
We make it all the
I
time.
have cried multiple times in this class, not as part of acting.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, everybody. That was lovely. What I really appreciate that we do each week here, it's a way to get you all comfortable with being your authentic self, being honest and in the moment with no performance required to get things started. This is so much about showing us who you are. And the repetition of class is really meant to give you an opportunity to feel like you belong on stage so that people can see and hear your story and let you authentically tell your story. And whether we're shaping that into a character, we're still going through that very experience. That was a very straightforward exercise of what matters to you. And sharing that into, in front of people, being seen, being heard. There is no right or wrong. There is no good or bad. It's either truthful or it's not. It's connected or it's not. The job here is not to be good or bad. You never, ever have to worry. Am I good? Am I bad? Am I right? Am I wrong? It's just about, is it real? We are in the business of making things real. So if that experience that you're bringing to the character, to the moment, to the scene, if it's connected, it's real. There's no denying that. Then there's some technical things like, you're out of focus because you overstepped your mark, and you had a great emotion, but your back was to the camera, whatever it may be. That's just like, we'll go again, we'll correct it. That's the beauty of this craft. So we'll go again. It's no big deal. Really, really nice job, you guys. Now, I wanted to do that exercise about now versus then because I think it was a good example for you to see what it's like to recall familiarity and know what things are like as a good starting point. That can be for circumstances, it could be for relationships, it could just be for what's that emotional core. It could be for anything. I'll give an example of something I just went through with Apple Cider Vinegar, the show that I did. I was having a really hard time with the dialogue for one because it was all medical and I had no idea what I was actually saying, so that was one aspect. I had to tackle that. But then the other side was about the relationship. I don't really know what it's like to be an oncologist trying to save a cancer patient's life. Couldn't possibly. There's nothing for me to relate to in that whatsoever. But point of view and the relationship of how I should be speaking to her was something that was sort of an in. And the reason I wanted to go back in time for that was I decided that there was kind of a combination of two things that I would use. And it worked pretty well. A really nice piece of feedback was even just through the rehearsal and then after take one, the directors and the other actors said to me like, wow, you really made me feel X, Y, and Z. And I was like, oh, cool. And even though that's not a good thing to make them feel, that was my job. That was my function of the character, to make them like intimidated, to have authority over them, to really assert myself as an expert. And these are all pretty well-known Australian actors, and I was naturally intimidated. But I just had to commit to, like, right now, you are my 15-year-old niece, I'm 25, and you're coming to me week after week with the same boy problems, and I'm like, how many times do I have to tell you? Teenage boys are A, B, and C. And then, they're just constantly coming to me like, oh, James, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, listen to me. And I'm like, I'm imploring them with my knowledge about how to handle these teenage boys. And, I'm trying to be delicate, but also trying to, like, say, I know what I'm talking about. But knowing that, I can't yell at my 15-year-old teenage niece, I have to have a certain demeanor and a certain, kindness, but still wanting to be like, ooh! So that was really palpable to me. Now, they're mothers, they're wonderful, they're mature, they're in their mid-30s, they're the most wonderful women. So like, it has nothing to do with now, but just 25, 30 years ago, it's so palpable to me still, of just like, okay, listen to me very carefully. When you go to prom, I need you to listen and just, have that right at the forefront of my mind. That was really easily accessible to me for the relationship in the as if. Otherwise, bringing things into now, a week doesn't go by where I don't say to myself, there's that saying, there are no stupid questions, only stupid answers. No, there are stupid questions. And I really wish I had a bigger business so I can have an assistant that could field those questions and I don't have to deal with that. But week after week after week, if there was something palpable now of just like, I cannot believe you think apple cider vinegar is going to heal your brain cancer, whatever it may be. I'm just like, oh my freaking God. That immediately was a palpable emotion. So between like the relationship and the core emotion of just looking at somebody with such incredulous, are you fucking kidding me kind of jumpstart. That was something that was, a combination of the two. But, having the time to work through that's very much how as ifs should work, of just what's familiar to you, what's a good starting point, and can I keep recalling that to inject from take after take and evolve it throughout the day. Even with either total strangers or people you're really intimidated by because they're very well-known actors, whatever it may be. This platform is also very much about like, hey, it's your time, you're on stage. When you get an acting job, your job is to be in the spotlight. And the more comfortable we can get with that, the easier it becomes. Simple as that. So that's why I always like to give you guys a place to be seen and heard, because that's the job. There's nothing worse than it's your line and you're like, oh, it's my line.
Me last week. Yeah, it's sync. You're like, I don't know what we planned.
It's your job. You've got the spotlight. You have to be seen and heard. It is your place to be seen and heard. So revel in that and relish that, enjoy that, and just be your authentic self. And show us what you got. And like I said, it is a bit subversive in that nobody has any idea what's going on in your head. It either it works or it doesn't. And I of course I called my niece later. I was like, so I just worked with one of the most beautiful actors today. I was really intimidated by her, but every single time they said rolling, I was like, you're my 15-year-old niece, and I'm really frustrated with you right now. And I love you, and I'm trying to help you, but oh my God, you're driving me nuts right now. And I just kept, putting like, I don't know what it was, whether it was an emotion or a visual of her, but I could call my niece afterwards and tell her, and she thought it was hilarious. But people on set had no idea what was going on in my head. But it worked. Okay, so thank you guys. Let's get into it. All right.